I recently hosted a live workshop with my friend Jerimiah Lancaster, who is the founding partner with me of the sales coaching business called hubermethod.com. We did a live workshop. We had over 400 people live in a Zoom room where we discussed sales, how to close, how to gain trust, our 6-step method. And it was a really great webinar. I hope you enjoy. We're going to play it right here live for you. And if you want to reach out to Jerimiah, go to hubermethod.com. Thanks for listening.
How do we keep people who are chatty from like burning up our whole half an hour window? Or some people are asking us a bunch of questions that have nothing to do with what we're offering. These are massive problems for salespeople. What are some tactical tips to like really control that pace and like make sure we're getting to what we need to get to?
Our job is to set the tone and set the pace here. So I like to think of like every sales call is like kind of like a book. There's a clear beginning, middle, and end. And so in the beginning, we need a repeatable way and a repeatable opener and a clear agenda. Where I think most people fail is not creating a really simple agenda and an end goal. You know, on our call today, we're going to help better understand whether or not sales coaching is a good fit for your team at Bolt Storage. Then we start jumping into an agenda. For the first 5 minutes or so, I want to learn a little bit more about your business. Then I want to share with you about how our coaching methodology works. And if it makes sense, I can share with you some of the pricing and get you a proposal by the end of this conversation. Does that sound like a good use of our time today?
Yep.
And then start asking really crisp questions. Nick, what do you want to cover on today's conversation?
I think a second part of that is to tell them that there's a hard stop. So if you have a 30-minute window, or even if you don't, you can say, hey, look, I just want to tell you, like I have, you know, it's 1:31 right now. We just got on a call. I have to get on the next one at 2. So I have 30 minutes with you. And literally 5 minutes in, if they're taking the conversation somewhere totally random, which people are crazy, they will talk about everything. I'll literally interrupt them. I'll say, you know, hey, I just want to remind you, like we have 20 minutes left and we have a lot to cover. I want to know if we can talk about XYZ. Would that be okay? And you're getting them back on track. You're taking control of that sales call so that you can A, get what you need to get done, and B, you're not wasting your time, because as a sales professional, you're making, you know, $50, $100, $200 an hour at times when you're on these sales calls. You got to make it count. Like time is money for you.
The other thing too is we want to start then jumping into questions. We should make this feel conversational. We should make it feel easy. We should spend more time understanding the prospect's business, right? And less about us pitching our product. Too often we jump right into, here's what my product, here's what my service can do. We really want to spend that time understanding the business. And then the last part is really where I tell people to get selfish. And to Nick's point here, the last 5 minutes, I always reserve for, you know, next steps. What I see too often is that people run a call up right up to the half-hour mark or the hour mark here.
Yeah, 30 seconds left. They're sprinting
I've
through.
got a minute left. What do you guys think? Can we talk about next steps? Maybe I could chat with you next week. Do you want me to send you a proposal here? And everyone's like, bye. They're all jumping off of the call. They say end call. Instead, what we can do is reserve the last 5 minutes. Hey, in the interest of time, I see that we've got about 5 minutes left. On today's call, we talked about 3 really important things about how to accomplish this. Does it make sense for me to actually get that proposal over to you later this afternoon? And if so, are you guys ready to make a decision? Now, if you have a service still directly on the call, hey, we've got about 10 minutes left. We just did this with one of the other businesses. I listened to a call here. He said, hey, I'm ready to move forward. And he said, okay, great. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left on the call. Do you have the proposal in your inbox? And he said, yeah, I got it in my inbox. He said, what do I need to do now? He said, first you need to sign it, and then you need to hit the payment link. 10 minutes of this conversation, walking through the proposal. Great. He goes, I signed it. And then he said, okay, great. I have a couple of questions. If this goes wrong, who's going to make sure that they fix it? Or, you know, they can validate that the math is right here. And he said, hey, I'm going to give you some confidence about how or why the sale's going to happen. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to validate it with our CPA. And then here's the payment link. And he said, hey, great. I got the payment link. And he said, just put your credit card in now. And then
our team has literally started one call closes for $3,000 plus decisions. And it's a beautiful.
This one was
it was a website?
No, it was a cost segregation site.
That's amazing. That is amazing. So this is a great question. I think we actually might end in this. How do business owners who do their own sales know when it's a good time to hire and bring on a salesperson or a team? I think that owners of businesses need to own the sales until they're making $20,000+ a month of profit. Like that's a line in the sand that I'm going to draw arbitrarily. Obviously, there's nuance. Obviously, there's things that change. But if you, as a business owner, are afraid of sales, you're not taking ownership of it, you're not getting coaching, you're not getting those reps, you're not practicing it, you're not getting better at it, your business is not going to thrive. You, as the business owner, the highest value thing that you can do, well, there's two of them, is to sell. You're outselling, you're talking to clients, and actually we have data that clients sold, like owners sold the business, that they close at a higher percentage than even the best sales reps. So you spend half your time selling and you spend half your time training and building your team. If your team is growing so fast that you can no longer hire fast enough, like, okay, forget running the lawnmower, forget building the website, forget actually delivering the product. If you're still doing that, then absolutely should not hire an outside salesperson. You need to be the one selling. As soon as your time and you cannot hire and manage your team fast enough, as soon as that overcomes half of your time, then it's time to bring on an outside salesperson. Jeremiah, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the highest value activity that most business owners can do is find talent and sell new customers. And I would argue that the best business owners never stop selling. They're always responsible for bringing in leads. They're always responsible for talking with customers. To get really specific about the question, whenever 90% of your time is selling and you can't run any other part of the business, then you should really start to evaluate. This is the time to start bringing in someone to sell. And maybe just to kind of bolt on to some of the other questions in here, there is a lot of fantastic 1099 talent that will go out and close deals for you. You can bring on a contract seller to actually help and validate that your sales process is working. The other thing too is that I always recommend hiring two people. Bring them in on contract, put them up to one another, and see who sells better. One is always going to be a little bit better than the other. Put them next to each other, pay them on high commission, no base salary, and let them run.
And then turn the one loose who doesn't do well. So I'm going to leave with a really tactical thing here. Chris says, hey, how do you think about this pitch? He wrote an example. Hey, Jeremiah, my name's Chris, and in the last 3 months, I've helped 20 homeowners completely negate their electric bill by switching to solar. Is that something that you'd be interested in? I hate that pitch, actually. That's way too vague. It sounds almost too good to be true. It doesn't sound personal at all. I would say, hey, Jeremiah, last week I helped somebody around the corner from your house, somebody in your neighborhood, save over $300. Be more specific. I helped them save over $300 a month on their electric bill by switching to solar. Do you want to have a conversation? That is a way better pitch than I've helped 20 homeowners save money on their electric bill.
Yeah, be specific and use real examples. I think that goes back to storytelling, making sure that you have a concrete example in stories, and people buy from other people, and whenever it's too broad of a solution, or to next point, it almost feels too good to be true. People kind of like red flags immediately go off.
That little pitch there just makes my bullshit meters go off in my head, and you don't want to flip those bullshit meters.
Big news, guys. I created a free PDF that details my method on how I analyze a self-storage facility and figure out what it's worth. Give me a pen, the back of a napkin, and a couple metrics, and I can figure out about what the property is going to be worth to me. If you want to download this PDF, click in the show notes, the first link, and you can give me your email address, and you get a email right away with 4-page PDF that outlines exactly how I think about underwriting or giving my initial analysis on a self-storage facility. Again, click the link in the show notes and you're going to get that document for free. This episode of The Nick Huber Show is brought to you by RE Cost Seg. If you want to maximize your bonus depreciation and minimize your tax liability, make sure to do a cost segregation study on real estate you've recently acquired. RE Cost Seg offers the lowest priced, fully engineered studies in the business, and you get a virtual site visit with a quick turnaround. They did 30 plus cost seg studies for me over the past year, including a short-term rental, along with my self-storage facilities. And I'm also an investor in the business, along with my good friend and CPA, Mitchell Baldridge, who you all know. To learn more about how bonus depreciation works, listen to episode 75 of The Nick Huber Show, or visit recostseg.com to go ahead and get a free proposal that outlines the cost of the study and your potential savings. Thanks again, recostseg.com.